All right. So welcome all to Elemental Herbalism. I love seeing all of your faces here, and feel free to use the chat as well if something comes up. I'll keep an eye on it at the end of the workshop, the class tonight, to go into it. Ooh, I think we might have, yes, we do. We have a few more people coming. All right. So I'll keep the chat open and I'll keep an eye on it, and we will have time at the end to ask any questions that may be coming up for you all as we go through the information. I'm very excited, here we go, to go through this here with you all. And I'm going to start with really the foundations. We're going to go into some of the theory that we can start implementing right away using elemental herbalism. There are a couple other schools of thought of herbalism as well that I do want to give credit to. So I will be coming from a Western and a European kind of understanding of herbal practice. There is also Ayurveda, there's also traditional Chinese medicine, there's also indigenous medicine, and a lot of oral traditions that I'll talk about later that through time may have not been recorded or we don't have as much access to, but there are some really great people doing great work to revitalize that information. Oh, perfect. Got all of your info here in the chat. Perfect. So my intentions for this class for you all to come away with is to come away knowing your elemental constitution. So this is the fun part where you get to know yourself herbally of what will be beneficial for you. How to think like an herbalist. If you walk into an apothecary, if you walk into an herbal shop, you go in and you're informed, right? You go in on a mission, an intuitive nudge is leading you there, and you know exactly what you need. So we'll be talking a little bit of how to think like an herbalist. We'll be talking a little bit about some mind, body, and spirit protocols that if you have a nudge towards, to definitely jot them down and use the references in the files to deepen your studies around that. We'll also be touching on the science and also the magic that is in herbalism. We can't separate the two when it comes to herbalism. It's such an important part of culture, especially indigenous culture and marginalized cultures that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to share what we know today in a clinical sense. It was those forebearers and creators of herbalism that we want to give credit to, which a lot of them were women. And then also how to be just educated around herbs, right? Just because herbs are natural doesn't mean that they're all safe. So we want to make sure that safety is always considered when it comes to our herbal practices. Oop, here we go. All right. So all you all know me, but I do want to give a little bit of background of where I come from when it comes to herbal knowledge, especially kind of in America, in the West, right? Because there's a lot of commercialization of herbs and a little bit maybe less magic coming from more magical communities. But I will say, and this will make sense in a little bit, I'm a fire and water constitution. I used to work as a product educator at Now Foods. So if you ever walked into like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's and you saw those orange and purple and white bottles, that was Now. And so I would do the education for that company. And I used to be the herbalist at Mer's Apothecary in Chicago, which is like this over 100-year-old apothecary in Chicago, which if any of the students at SOA are ever visiting Chicago, let me know and I will give you the hookup of all the things. And then flower essence practitioner, we will be touching a little bit on flower essences. I think a couple of you have brought up some questions about symbolism and frequencies of different plants. That's definitely more of a flower essence kind of thing. And also remaining alchemist. I work a lot at the inner emotional, spiritual level of personal transformation and healing, and how can we do that? And we can do that a little bit through herbs, which I'm really excited to share. So We know that herbs can be delivered in many different ways, right? Maybe you walk down an aisle of a supplement part of the store. You're like, oh, what are these capsules? And these are tablets. And what are these little tiny little dropper bottles that come up, or salves? Okay, what are all these things, right? And they are used for certain different ways of maintaining our wellness. So for daily benefit of the use of herbs, how many of you have heard of the word tincture before? Yeah. All right, perfect. So for daily use, tinctures, and I do have a little extract right here. Tinctures are diluted plant extracts. We'll get into this a little bit. Of extracts are usually alcohol or glycerin based, and you take a plant, you let it sit for usually 2 weeks. It's kind of a rule of thumb depending on the plant material, and that's extracting all of the phytochemicals, all of the good stuff from the plant. And then when you put it into a little dropper bottle, you put it in some water or some juice, you have made a tincture, a diluted extraction of a plant, right? And that can be used for daily use, for daily wellness. Like I have a Damiana extract right here. This one's really great for hormonal health, things like that. So I'll use that one when I'm feeling maybe some of those hormonal cyclical things happening, like, oh, okay, maybe some Damiana is going to help me with some energy, right? We then have capsules, and I chose the smelliest ones to open up as examples. But these are my favorite. They're really smelly, but they're really great. And for daily use, capsules are fabulous. Sometimes on the back, when we see our supplement facts, you'll see extract of XYZ plant. We want extracts of plants and then also whole plants when we look at the back of a bottle when it comes to capsules here. And those can be used for daily, for wellness, for maintenance, all those kinds of things, especially if there's something you've been working on, like, oh, my energy's been low, or the season is changing, it's fall right now, right? Like, how can I maintain my immunity? All these kinds of things. My favorite, and the one that kind of gets missed out on the most, is food. We've talked about this too in kitchen witchery, right? We have our spice cabinet. Those are all herbs, and we forget that, right? These are the simple things that we can put in. If you look at a thing of Italian seasoning, the magical properties of all the seasoning in Italian seasoning is protection, right? Like, let's protect. And even when we're, right, I made a spaghetti sauce this afternoon, and I sprinkled on that Italian seasoning and also some black pepper, because I was like, I need that extra protection with some stuff that's happening. So keeping that in mind, we don't have to go full on like extractions and potions, which we totally can, of course, but we also can look in our spice cabinets or look in our little gardens, or if you're in an apartment, like what's on the windowsill, right? To see what's around us that we can use. And then the last one, the fancy herbalist way of saying tea, is infusion. So if you ever hear you walk into a shop and they're saying, oh, I've made an infusion of XYZ plant, it is a very strong tea, right? And one of my favorites in the list that I included in the files is infusion of nettles that I let sit overnight. Sometimes a cold infusion, I'll let it sit inside the refrigerator overnight so it's super strong, make it for the week ahead. I know that my allergies are acting up. I'm like, let's get some nettle infusion going. And I can drink that on the daily, right? When it comes to something that's acute, so if it's not just maintenance, but we want to work on, like, oh, I have the sniffles, or I have the beginning of feeling kind of run down, or noticing that I may be in a season of life where the emotions are really heightened or going through grief, right? Acute use of herbs, these are a couple ways we can do it. So extracts, right? Mentioned these before. Instead of putting them in water and diluting them on the regular, we're taking them straight. And they might not be the most delicious. It can be a little bit bitter, but I will say, and I hope that you all keep this as a little herbal rule of thumb cheat, is if it's bitter, your liver will love you, right? Bitters, they're all for your liver. So that's a good thing. And that's when we're using extracts when there's something a little bit more intense happening. Capsules, again, this can be when we're looking at the back of the label and it says extract of, right? Like if we were getting turmeric, for example, and curcuma is the active phytochemical that people look at for inflammation, be like, oh, 100% curcuma in the turmeric. This will make a little bit sense later. But we'll look at that when it comes to capsules using for acute situations. Also, if you've been like working out a lot or you fell down, you had an accident, compresses. This is a really great way to use herbs. Get your infusion together, get a little cloth towel or a linen towel or canvas, and dip that into the infusion. I usually like to go warm with these because I don't like the cold, but that's just me. And I dip it and I put that on top of, if I like accidentally bruised or cut up my knee, like I had a bad bike accident, I'm gonna use some calendula infusion because calendula helps really well with cuts and sprains and things for healing the skin. It's got some really good phytochemicals in it. And that's a compress, right? We'd use that for more acute situations. And then, of course, the other more acute situation where we could use herbs is homeopathic preparations. And this is a whole other class that could be done. And if anybody has ever taken any homeopathic remedies, all of the names sound like something out of Harry Potter. It's all the Latin names of something, and it's all the quick gist of it is you're getting the poison or the negative thing that causes the ailment, just like in a way, kind of like a vaccine, and you're training your body energetically to heal itself using that homeopathic preparation. There's a lot of controversy around homeopathy. There are some really great documentaries that I will be including in the Great Hall for those of you that are like, ooh, I have an intuitive nudge towards this, or looking towards maybe working with a homeopath, that I'll be including in the Great Hall for you all to deep dive in, knowing that this is a lot of information. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, that is very okay. We're just deep diving right away. And I'm just gonna check the chat real quick here. Perfect. All right. And I will get to that question right at the end. Thank you so much. So elemental constitutions. This is the fun part. It's like, this is where we get personal. And we're gonna go back to water, fire, earth, and air. And why water, fire, earth, and air? If we historically look at herbalism and where the origins are, we look at the original alchemists in Europe, right? If we're looking through the Western herbal lens. And they were trying to change matter. They were trying to transform different minerals to gold. They were trying to create the philosopher's stone, right? Like, how can we live forever? How can we increase quality of life? Accidents happen, fumes were made, and the pharmacist was the next evolving alchemist, right? This is where we started to get some medicine. We have an intersection in history as well of villagers and healers, midwives, that knew how to heal using the herbs that were native to where they were living. And this is also really, really important because the monasteries at the time also were collecting that information and documenting them at the time, right? If we didn't document it, it was really hard to collect it because it was very much an oral tradition. It's like, you go to the healer in the village and they're going to give you this and that flower and that root, and you're going to be good. So we have this kind of emergence of the alchemists, the pharmacists, the monastics coming together to create the different herbal protocols that we have today. A lot of evolution has happened, but this is where we're getting water, fire, earth, and air from, because they definitely used these different modules to name the different materials that they were using. So I'll give a minute or a couple minutes to discover what is your elemental constitution. And a quick way that you can find this out is your sun, moon, and rising. And you'll see here your Aries, Sagittarius, and Leos are your fire. Your Gemini, Libras, and Aquariuses are your air. Your Cancer, Scorpios, and Pisces are your waters. And your Taurus, Virgos, and Capricorns are your earth. And we know that if you've ever gotten an astrological reading, there are many, many planets that are involved in a birth chart. However, to get us started, we're just going to use our sun, moon, and rising. And this is where I mentioned that I'm a fire, water constitution. I got a Sag sun, a Leo moon, and then a Cancer rising. So I'm putting these two together. I'm like, fire, water, yes. And this will all make sense once we get it down. Like, oh, wait, I have excess water, or I'm deficient in fire. This is how it's showing up physically, mentally, spiritually, right? So we'll give about a few minutes or so. If you want to drop them in the chat, your constitutions, I'd love to see them. And if not, there'll be time even after class to, to go into that. Not a problem at all. Ooh, great. Our rising is the only. That is totally fine. What if we know our rising is the only earth in our chart? Yes, that would still work as an earth. And would it still qualify as water, earth, Cancer, Virgo? Yeah, because I am a Sag, Leo, fire, and then Cancer, water. So I'm like fire, water. Great question. Yeah. I got you. So we got air, earth, fire. I like it. I have one of each except water. Awesome. Really good to know. And this is the great thing of when we notice, ooh, maybe what's missing or what maybe, supportive is, oh, maybe I want some water herbs to support me, right? Because that's not part of my constitution. Of course, it may show up in other planets. But for right now, we're just going to use our sun, moon, and rising. We got double fire and air. I need all them earth herbs. Yeah. Right? And this is also a really great tool to see, oh, wait, I need maybe some earthy people around me, or I need some watery people around me to complement. This is why community is so important, to see all these different perspectives. Because if I'm just all fire and then no air, I'm like, oh, wait a second, I'm doing, but not analyzing, et cetera, right? I'm oversimplifying a lot, but for time's sake, want to give you all this very simple tool to get your constitutions this evening. I love seeing these, and I'm going to look forward to seeing them in the Great Hall as well. So moving into, what does all this mean, right? Like, okay, I got my constitution. We're going to look at, what does this balanced element of air, what does excess look like? What does deficiency look like? Because this is how we're going to figure out what herbs we may want for a supportive protocol for ourselves. So when air is balanced, and if we're thinking about air, we're thinking of the mind, we're thinking also air, literally the lungs, right? Maybe a dryness with air. When air is balanced, we are clear-minded, right? There's a clarity there, and the breath is the foundation. We're very much connected to our breath, right? Like right now with COVID happening, we may be dealing with a collective air deficiency and needing extra lung support, right? When things are in excess with air, we got too much air, right? Like a airhead. We're feeling ungrounded. We're like in the thoughts, that meme of like all the calculations and that lady going like, what, right? That is excess air. This is also where we may experience like nervous disorders, where there's too much anxiety, there's too much of this frenetic energy that's happening inside. And we feel this is where, right, if we're thinking about the bringing this excess air to balance, I'd probably go towards earth, right? To bring us back down to earth. Also, excess air is an amorphous thing, entity. So there's also no boundaries with air. It's like, I'm just gonna like share with everyone, put it all out there. Here's my idea, here's this, and excitement, right? I love it. I love enthusiasm. I love some good mania. And how can we bring back some of that boundary and some of that balance to this air type of feeling, this air type of constitution? When we have deficiencies in air, this is where we might get a little bit extra water. So we got perspiration, like, I'm sweating a little bit more before a presentation, or I'm, feeling a little bit off and damp in that way. This also may be low energy, where we might want to bring in some fire to our protocols. And deficiency also too, it's thinking of dampness in the body, like oily skin. Be like, oh man, I am more oily in this part of the month. Like just noticing that and being like, okay, maybe I need some air to balance out this oiliness, right? And I know there were some questions about magical actions because these are very practical. And I included these here for you all. Go very literal with these, right? And I'll go through the different air plants that I included here, the different air herbs. But magical actions, literally when you are creating a ritual using an air plant or herb and blowing the material out. This is like thinking of the little kid blowing on a dandelion, right? Just blowing away whatever it is that might want to be happening, or wanting to be manifested or getting back to balance. For those of you that are interested in smoking herbs, and there are different smoking herb blends, that is also another option. And dispersing of herbs, right? I don't know if many of you or some of you have heard of seed bombs, where it's a really great reclaiming of the land by creating wildflower little bombs, seed bombs, little mud packs, and then they put them in little urban environments, and then the wildflowers and the herbs start going back into the urban environments. I know one of the questions was, how can we still respect the plants that we use? And that is a fabulous and also really sneaky punk subversive way to bring some of that dispersion back and make a spell out of it, right? Like, okay, I want to get back to balance with my air, or I want clarity of mind. I'm going to make a seed bomb. I'm going to get these seeds and put them out there here in my neighborhood. And next year, some wildflowers are going to grow, right? So very simple with air in that way, that we can start using some air herbs. Ooh, I love what's coming through. Yes. And great question about smoking herbs. You can let them smoke literally like on your altar. And then there's also literal smoking blends that people make, like little herbal cigarettes. Different people have different thoughts on them. It's definitely, for some people, really beneficial, especially if they're trying to end nicotine kind of smoking or tobacco smoking. So that is one of the ways that people can engage in an air ritual with the herb. But great question there. Now we got fire. I'm not biased at all. Love some good fire herbs here. And when fire is balanced within our bodies, within our minds, within our spirits, we have sustained energy. Like, right, the flame isn't burning out. It's actually very constant. We have healthy inflammation. What does that mean? And usually inflammation is a big buzzword. It's like, oh, it's inflammation, that's a bad thing. Inflammation when in excess is a bad thing. But if we were to fall down from our bike and then cut our knee, and then all the alarm bells need to go up for that knee to start healing, that's healthy inflammation. If we didn't have inflammation, it wouldn't ever heal. It wouldn't turn red. It wouldn't go, like, all the blood in the circulation wouldn't go to that part of the body that needs that support. So healthy inflammation is like when it's just right. When we have too much inflammation, that's when we can start feeling a little bit off, and it can cause a lot of different distressing illnesses and discomforts and disorders in the body. And then also emotionally, when fire is there, there's passion, there's enthusiasm. There's like, yes, this is what's so, an igniting type of energy. When we have fire in excess, this is where tempers and anger can come up. So we're quick to react in like the most non-subtle way that can cause harm to ourselves and others. There's always time for righteous anger, but this may come more from a reactive, subconscious space rather than from a conscious, angry space. excess, like I mentioned, inflammation. And then one of the signs of inflammation is pain, just pain through the body. A little quick tip, anything with the ending of itis at the end of it is inflammation. Gastritis, arthritis, all these were, that is all inflammation at the end of it, right? So knowing that, we can go into how can we bring that into balance? What are some things we can bring the inflammation down, or the fire inflamed, right? Thinking of it in that way. When we have deficiencies of fire, like maybe the flame is just like, I'm not feeling the passion, right? We may feel physically drained or burned out, right? That has to do with our adrenals in our body. Stagnation of processes, or the feeling of procrastination, where we judge ourselves over not doing certain things, be like, hey, maybe I'm just fire deficient, or I'm in a season right now, part of my cycle in my body, or the season that there's some stagnation happening. And then also feeling physically cold. If your hands get cold, feet get cold, that can also be deficiency of fire showing up physically in the body. When it comes to magical practices with fire and fire balancing, we can burn the plant, right? Engaging in candle magic and putting the herbs that we want to put around the candle or in a vessel. And then anything, I mean, this is like the pyro ritual to engage in fire with, like, I want to reignite something or connect with a deeper kind of flame that's sustainable. And thinking of the intention with fire and fire constitutions when they're in balance is bringing back the spark, or igniting, or starting. I'm just gonna have a quick look here at the chat. Yeah, noticing deficiencies, right? Like, keep note of these things as we're sharing, like, oh, what maybe I'm deficient in, because this will be really helpful with what herbs are supportive, what rituals you might want to engage in, using herbs, or just playing with fire safely. All right, let's move to earth. And let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Yeah, yes, yeah, definitely. It can definitely be hard to know where to start. Be like, okay, where are the missing pieces? So with earth, we have balanced earth, feeling strong in your core, having a presence about you, a body awareness, right? Where you're nurturing yourself and you're nurturing your community and others equally, and you're feeling really solid with yourself. This is where I would even get into gratitude practice with earthiness. And when you're feeling super balanced in your earth element, seeing like, oh, I am so grateful for my skeletal system supporting me, right? As things can go wrong. So why not be grateful now for what we have? When we have excess of earth, this is buildup in the body. This can show up as plaque um, in the circulatory system, in the kidneys, with different stones, right? Like gallstones, things like that. There's too much calcium, there's too much sediment, too much earth inside the body. Emotionally, this can show up as stubbornness, right? Like, I am strong in who I am and I am not budging, right? Stubbornness. And sometimes it's right, like, I am true to this, and you've done your inner work to be like, hey, this is my strength. But when it goes to your detriment, this is where emotionally the stubbornness is like still causing harm. And it can also show up as we are so solid that we are tense, right? Shoulders are up to the ears. The booty is just like clenched. The muscles in the legs and the arms are maybe like, wait a second. Oh, wait, let me just check in with myself. Oh, let me take a breath. Everyone just like shoulders down for a little bit, right? Just noticing like, oh man, I was kind of earthy right now. It's a little excess of earth. And tension in the body shows up in this way. That can lead to headaches, that can lead to inflammation, right? And causing different pains in the body. So that's excess of earth. Deficiencies of earth, this is where we have brittle bones, right? Dealing with skeletal and structural issues within the body. We may feel kind of just like with air, ungrounded. I am not in touch with the earth, right? I'm not in touch with the body. And then also deficiencies of earth, maybe excess of air, bloating and gas, right? The structure is there, but like all this extra air, this weird non-structured space is allowing for bloating, gas, and surprise toots. We do not want that, right? We want to have like healthy digestion happening. When it comes to magical actions, when it comes to earth plants and earth herbs, this is where we're burying the plant, right? This is where you are engaging maybe in creating your own essence of a plant, which in the files we have the little tutorial video of how to make your own flower essence, plant essence. Or for those of you that are really into like the physicality of playing with herbs, mortar and pestle or blender and blending and powdering the herbs, making them into dust, making them into dirt, right? And using them within your spellcraft and rituals to support you. And I always like to think of earth herbs for the grounded and earthly matters. If there's something, it could be physical well-being, but it could also be like, hey, the house and the roof over my head, or I want to move into a new space. Thinking of the earth that supports you in physical and material matters. And physical manifestations, this is like, all right, I've analyzed and I've aired it, I've fired and I've taken action. Okay, let's bring some earth to this manifestation and this desire that I want to put into practice. All right, and let me check real quick on the chat here. Flip between deficient and excess earth, especially in my diet. Yeah, we can get to that with the flip flop, because that may be like a longer term ritual or protocol to explore to see what works for yourself or for somebody in your community that you want to support. Yeah. So for water, when water is balanced, right? We are the vessel. Earth is balanced. We have our emotions. It was connected with emotions in water. Just like for those of you that are doing the tarot class, cups, water, emotion, same connection here. So we're containing the emotions. They're expressed, they're processed, they're witnessed, and they're within you, right? And we know how to navigate our emotional tides and flows. Surprising, but it also makes sense, right? Balanced water also shows up as clear skin, right? When we had excess, it could be showing up as oily skin. And then also with water too, which water is such an intuitive part of the elements, in tune with intuition and in tune with the rational part of our being. So we're decisive. We're in tune with the intuition that is helping us and supporting us to make intuitive decisions. When we have excess water, this is where the emotions maybe aren't contained or they feel like they're too much. And this could also be a judgment, right? Because I'm all about highly sensitive people feeling deeply in the world, and like a leaf can make you cry because the light is just perfect. But there's also the point where, oh, is this getting in the way of my day to day, right? That's what I mean with overly emotional or excessive water in that way. The other thing with excess is like phlegmatic. That means like stuffed up, feeling damp, feeling heavy. Boogery is the less clinical term for, right, phlegmatic, a phlegm being mucus. And this could show up in other parts of the body as well, just feeling heavy with phlegm. Oily skin, like I mentioned, showing up in the body, on the face or in other parts of the body too. And then damp conditions, where this means like you're sometimes cold or you're using the washroom a lot, needing to relieve all of the excess water in the body and noticing that, right? And deficiencies of water is some feeling emotionally numb or not in tune with our emotions or our intuition, right? Inflammation, going back to if there's a little bit of excess fire and we need a little bit of water to cover that up, right, to take the fire out, can show up as inflammation. And then if we have excess air, deficiency of water, can show up as dry skin, or in some urban areas, eczema can kind of show up with the dry, kind of flaky skin in that way. For magical actions, intentional infusions and decoctions, so fancy tea times, using your herbs. And I forgot to mention, infusion is the tea, yes. Decoction is also a tea, but that's when we're using heavy plant material. So instead of like flowers and leaves, we're using barks and roots. And those need to be boiled because it's a harder plant material to really extract all the good phytonutrients and phytochemicals from that plant material. I know a lot of you are making moon water, so moon herbs, right? Like adding a couple of those maybe watery herbs to your moon water and letting that sit wherever you make your moon water. Add some extra potency to your moon water. It makes it definitely more unique for you, or if you're making it for somebody in your community. And I always like to go with, when it comes to ritual work with water herbs, as clearing blocks, right? That decisiveness, the connection with intuition, allowing emotional flow, even if it can sometimes feel like a lot, especially if we've been emotionally numb for a little bit. And then also love and relationships, because everyone loves a good love spell when it comes to water herbs in this way. So let me go back to chat here and check in. Yes, I feel like the water is calling me out. Could we be both deficient and excess in certain ways? Yes, right? Like I mentioned with our chart, there's so much in the chart. And even with herbs, there's so much in an herb. So the nuance, and if you're noticing there's a little bit of both, and that's totally valid. And it's totally up to you on what you want to prioritize as, ooh, if I could get maybe some more balance in my water, this would cascade then to like, oh, balancing my fire, or that's going to show up in my air, right? It's all interconnected. So give yourself the nuance of the both and in the case of elemental herbalism for sure. With that, I want to go into our PDF that is available for everyone in the files in the Great Hall. So I'm going to share that really quickly here. Oop. With just a little bit more on some of the history and shout outs to the people before us that really led to the herbal treatments, protocols, and healing that we have today. And like I mentioned before, we have that beginning of alchemy, ALK, alcohol, connection, extractions and manipulations of matter, but then also this blending of the small village wisdom, which I'm always about. And in the cheat sheet of all of the elemental herbs, you'll see that some of them are highlighted, and I will mention why. And it's because of this woman here, Maria Trebin, who was, I think, one of the few witches that had luckily her stuff documented and then brought over to the US for healing herbs. And if anybody ever goes to Eastern Europe, everybody in their house has Maria Trebin's book, which is so nice, right, as representation. And she took inspiration from smaller villages as well, and spoke to herbalists at the time to support different healing protocols. Highly recommend her work as somebody that's just really taken that on and brought her work to the West. And then for those of you that watched the Baby Witch class, know that the witch hunts, unfortunately, we lost a lot of information. We lost a lot of herbal protocols and wisdom from the midwives and herbalists of that time, and just imagining how much information did we lose since that genocide, right? Like there was just so much information that was available. And what is exciting right now in contemporary herbal kind of practice is this resurgence of going back to see what can we unearth. And I really want to just plant the seed of, if there's a nudge to looking ancestrally into what are the herbal, right, protocols and healing methodologies that are part of your ancestry or your ancestral work, to really dig into those. There's some really great communities that I'll be sharing that are really trying to lift up those voices that we don't have anymore. I also want to mention that as we were coming into the West, more like the colonial perspective of things, that also still said, no, this is witchcraft. We are not allowed to engage in this, but we will steal indigenous and enslaved people's wisdom, right? Just want to give that, because a lot of the Western and American herbalism that we have today comes from these people, and they deserve the credit and accolades of their wisdom that they brought from their own countries and shared it with healing to Americans as America was developing. And one woman that I just love that she did this in the best way was Marie Laveau in New Orleans, who just worked with some of the rich white folk at the time. And she mentioned a couple different herbal remedies and protocols to them. It's like, oh, my daughter isn't feeling well. I'm going to talk to Marie and see what she's going to do. And of course, she knew all of her stuff. She grew up with this. This is normal part of culture. And that was the in for her to make the name for herself, to then also give rise to other populations that were marginalized, to say, hey, leave these people alone, when still racism was such a huge issue, which it still is. But at the time, creating a really safe space and also documentation of herbal protocols from the cultures that be. So just big kudos to Marie Laveau at that time, really reclaiming the indigenous and enslaved people's wisdom that we share today. And then, of course, a little shout out, and in the PDF, the English Physician book is available. If you click on it to read the whole thing, it's 700 pages. I don't recommend you read all of it, but it's a really great digital reference. What is interesting is that Nicholas Culpeper took a lot of this information from previous women, and he, the man, was the one that finally normalized herbalism as a clinical practice, or a clinical protocol that we could use regularly. So this was kind of the turning point in America that brought in this opportunity to work with herbs. We then get from overseas, from the UK, Dr. Batch, who created flower essences, and he was a regular doctor, but he was noticing that there was definitely an emotional component to physical illness. So for those of you that are interested in more of the emotional care that comes with herbs, Dr. Botch's work, which is included his little 38 flowers and flower essences that he did research on to help with emotional well-being and also physical illness. It's a little bit different than an infusion with the flower essences. It's definitely lighter, and we're talking more emotion. So he brought in a different perspective of using herbs in a lighter, more of a sensitive type of way. And I highly recommend for when the water is a lot, Dr. Botch's rescue remedy, which I've used over the years and have recommended to clients all the time for a lot of emotional stress and grief especially. When we get to the 1970s in the US, we start getting a revival of herbalism by Rosemary Gladstar, who is definitely a queen that created traditional medicinals, the tea brand, and also the first herbal school, and then also plant savers. As one of the questions that was brought up about herbs is, how can we respect the land and the herbs that we bring in. And she created plant savers as a way to do that, to notice what is being over harvested, how can we respect the land, how can we cultivate herbs in a way that's sustainable. And plant savers and Rosemary's work is very much a big influence in the herbal community in the US on how we can do that. And then contemporary herbalism today, thank goodness, we do not need to hide from, you know, the witch trials and witch hunting about herbal remedies. There are now clinical schools that focus on holistic complementary care that are using herbal protocols in most of the world and now in the US. Herbal protocols are the first go-to for supportive care. And now we have representation of herbalists from all different backgrounds, which is great. And going back to how do we give voices to the herbalists of the past that didn't have a voice or were marginalized or were part of the genocide, unfortunately, right? And for those of you more interested in in-person or more of these kinds of workshops, the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference is a really, really great, super crunchy herbal conference that goes into phytotherapy, goes into plant rituals, resources from the American Herbalists Guild, which is established to kind of keep some kind of regulation over herbalists, because technically you can just say you're an herbalist and then, you know, be fine with it. But the American Herbalists Guild is the kind of overarching body that shares the latest research, conferences, webinars, and books and things for herbalists that are practicing today. And I do want to share, there was the question of some good ethical suppliers, some good resources, like where can I get some good herbs and seeds? And Mountain Rose Herbs is my first go-to. They've been really good about naming if something is out of stock because of overcultivation. They take really good feedback from clients too, that if you have questions about where things are sourced, they'll be really explicit and not hide anything, which is great. And they've changed over the years a lot to be more in that capacity as a supplier of herbs. Another one that I really love is Organic India, for those of you that are maybe interested in Ayurvedic herbalism or traditional Chinese medicine, which are two other different modalities from Western herbalism. Organic India is really, really great. And then of course, Now Foods, because I've seen how they do things. And I'm like, is it though? Is it good? And then and they were good. So they're really good with their sourcing. Anima Mundi is an herbalist practitioner that is out in New York that has some really great sourced herbal combinations, herbal supplements. I have her little mushroom mocha powder that I add to my coffee, which is really, really great for various different things, immune support and energy and a couple of things. But Anima Mundi is a really great brand. Gaia has their farm out in North Carolina, and they're, I think, one of the strictest for their potencies. When I was talking about extracts and how do we get a really good extract from a plant, Gaia has some really, really good good supplements. Their adrenal support for water excess is really, really good. Can highly recommend that. Herb Farm, maybe you've seen this one around. Really popular for extractions. If you don't want to make your own extractions at home and you're like, hey, I know that I really want to balance my earth and this is what I want for my list, I just go and grab like the individual herb. They also have combination herbal blends as well. Traditional medicinal, as I mentioned, this is Rosemary Gladstar's company. Really great, organic and ethical in their sourcing. When there would be a plant that was oversourced. All of a sudden the tea wasn't in stock anymore. We're like, what's going on? It was like, oh, they're over harvesting. Like, oh, okay, cool. They're actually doing what they say they're going to do, right? United Plant Savers, as I mentioned, really great resource to kind of keep track of what plants are being sustainably harvested, and how we can be really good stewards, right, of land. Chicago Women's Health Center, and there are quite a few other ones that they list on their website, is a really great integrative practice that includes herbal protocols along with traditional clinical protocols for well-being, which is really nice to see in urban environments. There's also, I believe, like the cosmic bus or something like that, cosmic wellness bus, that also does community herbalism, and does education classes, but also sees people at all different levels using herbal care. And then I mentioned, of course, the American Herbalist Guild for like latest studies on things. And here are the fun tools for you all that I'm very excited. So we talked about the different constitutions of the herbs, and these are actually some herbs and what they do, right? So we have them all as a cheat sheet here, right? Earth herbs are here to restore, ground, and nourish. Like, oh, okay, what can I choose from the menu of all these kinds of earthy herbs? And you see how I highlighted or low lighted these two herbs here. These are from Maria Trebin's book, the ones that she'd always talk about. So I just want to highlight her work here for you all. And these are also a little bit more easy to get your hands on if you are looking to build your own protocols of things. So for example, if I wanted some burdock root, I'd make a decoction. I would boil the root because it's a root and not like a flower. And it works as a diuretic, as an expectorant, as an appetite stimulant, and also as an insecticide. If you want to make a spray of burdock root when you're out camping, right? You can make a little infusion, get a little spray bottle, and you got burdock root insecticide, right? So very fun, creative opportunities here to play with the different herbs here, and knowing what your deficiencies and excesses are. And here we have air, and we have also the different associations. I know there were some questions about the symbolism of different herbs, and we have air with Mercury, Jupiter, and Uranus, lightweight, fresh, clean, leaning more on masculine or yang, communication, what can change, and then also the systems that these different herbs tend to support, right? So we have caraway, for example, which is an air herb, and it helps with a cough, with digestive support, the bloat prevention when we have that excess of air, right? That bloating that might happen. And just here, for example, you'll notice a couple of these herbs, they'll have a little asterisk. And as always, with any herbal protocol that you decide to take, make sure that you know, or you're taking your full responsibility for your health. You're letting your primary care physician, care team know that you're taking these herbs, because this one, caraway, will lower blood pressure. If you already have low blood pressure, you don't want to mess with that, right? Want to keep ourselves safe. There are a couple other ones that do the same thing, but also you know your body best. You want to listen to that. And then here we have fire. We got black walnut leaves as an example. A circulatory stimulant. This is getting the blood pumping. If you want to do a natural hair dye or just kind of darken your hair, you can do an infusion of black walnut leaves. Also, if you want to drink it, it's a multi-mineral. If you're noticing that your earth is maybe a little bit in deficiency and you need more minerals to supplement, works as a multi-mineral. Also antifungal and an antiseptic. So this is why it works really great as a hair wash, because it's antiseptic and antifungal. Blueberry leaves, and also I just want to do a shout out to cherry stems because I know most people will throw them away. Really great diuretic and kidney support. So all parts of the plant, all parts of the fruits and vegetables we eat have some kind of support of the body. All of the plant has some magic to it, right? So we have our fire, we have our water, so we have more of these herbs available as well. And then for those of you interested in, I'll come back to this in a second, we talked a lot about color in our intuitive art, right? And also with reading energy, but also color has some scientific proponents to it as well. So if we're going in to the grocery store and we're getting tomatoes, the phytochemical that's involved with creating the red color of the tomato is lycopene. Lycopene is fabulous for hair, skin, and nails. Like awesome skin, healthy balancing. Be like, ooh, red. Of course, we want to eat a little bit of the whole rainbow of everything here, and herbs also are in a whole rainbow of things. But as you get familiar with these phytonutrients that are involved in different plants and foods that we eat, I know lots of you love some good clinical studies and good research. So I included here some phytonutrient studies of what's the benefit of all these phytonutrients. Phyto just means plant, nutrient, as we know, the nourishing good stuff that we put in our bodies. So we have here beta cryptoxanthin, alpha and beta carotene, right? Longevity and antioxidant support. That's the like TLDR version of the study. But for those of you that are wanting to kind of maybe collect these studies and really take seriously a study of a particular herb to support you magically, physically, spiritually, you can add this to your book of shadows. I'm all about let's add some science to the magic to support ourselves, right? And with that, I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. Yes, I included some go-to, some of my favorites for you all for immune support, nervous system support, skin, energy. And we are just about at that time. And always, of course, taking full responsibility for your health and well-being. So making sure we're safe. I would love to hear in the Great Hall if there's a protocol that you're like, ooh, Isabel, maybe I want to try this, or what do you think of this blend, right? To get that feedback and then let your care team know that that's something you want to explore or try out safely. Or even just magically, like I did a spell with blueberry leaves. What happened, right? And being curious about those things. So with that, we are just about at the hour. And so I want to open up here the chat and we will close up the recording and we'll allow for some open Q&A. I'm sure there's plenty that's coming up. And also things that you're like, ooh, I want to hear more about this or that, because that could help influence like a part 2 if that is something that folks want to do. So I'm going to close the recording now.